Yo, what is going on? PartTimerZack here. In today's video, I wanted to talk about Blue Archive and more importantly, talk about how to level up your account, which will in turn allow you to level up your characters so you're able to get through some of the campaign a little bit easier. I've been struggling a little bit and I found a way to essentially level up my account a little bit faster. And I've also been able to find a way to kind of help out with the relationship bonds, as those do give you stats increases. So let's go ahead and jump into the campaign. So jumping into the campaign, you can actually see that I'm in area 3 here still. So I really recommend getting to the highest area that you can and then trying your hardest to try to 3-star one of the missions. Now, the reason I say that is because as you kind of go through the different areas, you can actually see that some of the rewards get a little bit higher and they get a little bit more worth it essentially. So if you go into the 3-3 that I was able to 3-star, you can actually see that I get these, which will help me out when it comes to leveling up my skills, which is kind of a huge boost, especially since the only way to currently get it when it comes to skill boosts and stuff like that is going through the bounties, which you can only get 2 tickets a day essentially, unless you buy it from the shop, which we'll talk about here in a couple minutes. But essentially what you want to do is go into the area that you're highest in, go to the highest mission essentially for the best rewards, and then you want to go in and sweep it. So essentially you go in here and you sweep it as many times as you want. I'm just going to go ahead and say 15. And the cool thing is it actually just costs stamina. It doesn't have any skip tickets or anything like that. So you can just do it all the way to your heart's content when it comes to the overall skills. And you can see I actually went from level 18 to level 19. So this is what I've been kind of doing. It also does give you, for example, when I'm in area 3, it does give me a couple different things that I can use to essentially level up my skills, which will help out quite a bit. Now, as you kind of progress, obviously, as you go into area 4 and 5, have better rewards and stuff like that. Now, there are 2 methods to essentially doing this. You can do it kind of in a bulk way, essentially, where you go through one day and you just level up your account essentially as high as you can get it. And then you go through all the different areas until you get stuck again and kind of rinse and repeat. Or you can do kind of the stagger thing, which is what I really recommend, especially at the very beginning, where essentially you go into area 1 and maybe you're struggling with area 2. So you grind a little bit for area 1 until you get to a point where you can level up to start to pass area 2, and then so on and so forth until you get to the next area. Now that's just the way that I've been kind of doing it, because the stagger step really does help out, especially because the areas seem to get increasingly better with the rewards. So that's just what I recommend when you're doing these kind of steps. So then after you get to a certain point on the level, you can go into your students and then of course upgrade them from the levels. So it doesn't really seem like it at first. You can actually see once you go from a different level, for example, from 17 to 19, that's actually a pretty big boost when it comes to my HP, attack, and all this kind of different stuff. And it does help quite a bit, especially when you're doing it to all your different teammates. So it really does help the overall team and just give you a little bit more of that power boost than maybe you realize when you were kind of going through it. So the other thing is obviously kind of working on some of the different skills here. This will also help out quite a bit. As you can see, these are ones I'm actually grinding from the overall missions. You can actually see that there are some missions that'll be able to give it to me. If I go into here and see kind of the shortcuts, it'll give you a little bit of an idea of some of the different places you can actually get those. And then some of them are actually only by these bounties, which I was talking about earlier. So talking about the bounties, as you can see, you actually only have 2 out of 2, but if you go into the shop, you can actually buy a couple more tickets. Now, I don't really recommend this too much because they do cost the premium currency. So it's kind of up to your own discretion and how you want to spend that premium currency when it comes to grabbing these tickets. It does look like you can only buy one time every single time that it refreshes. So every 13 hours, essentially, you can buy another ticket. So at first I was really hoping this would be kind of a one and done thing where you just buy it once and it's a permanent 3 ticket, but unfortunately it's not. It's just every single time that you buy it, and it refreshes every 13 hours. So real quickly, I wanted to talk about bounties. So if you are able to go in here and you are able to 3-star one of these missions, you can actually run it as auto. I'm sure you guys have seen it. You can sweep it as many times as you have tickets essentially, and then you can actually see your rewards at the bottom and the enemies, so you can kind of plan your teams and whatnot. I just wanted to kind of mention that in case you didn't know that you can actually sweep those. So it is a little bit easier, obviously. No skip tickets again with that. You can just kind of go through it. So the next thing I want to talk about is lessons, CAF, and the Momo Talk. So the little cell phone here. These are going to be a big way to increase your bond, which is going to help you with stats increases. And it also gives you one of the full arts essentially. Now each character has an own bond level to essentially unlock the full art animation. As you can see here, it kind of depends on the character. So as you build that bond, you'll be able to see it in Momo Talk. And then after that, you'll be able to be prompted to essentially do a story mission that gives you the overall art. And then whenever you go into up here, you can actually select who you want to click on your full screen. And as long as it has a 1 out of 1, you can actually see who has these full arts. And if you have the full art to begin with, essentially, and then you can actually click it and it'll go through this little animation. Now, jumping into lessons, I do want to talk about this because I think this is a good way to build your bonds. Now, this is a little bit random because it does give you a couple different rewards as you kind of rank up through the different offices. You can actually see that you get these tech notes, which will help you out with the skill increases. And then you can click all locations. So you do get 3 tickets a day, essentially. And then you go in here and you start the lesson, and you can see it gives you EXP for the overall level for the lessons here. And it gives you a couple different rewards. And then depending on the characters that are actually up here, it will actually give you a bond increase for those different characters. Now, it doesn't always rank up the bond. Essentially, sometimes it just gives you a little bit of a boost there. And then you can see it in Momo Talk to essentially see how far you got. But it is kind of a good way to randomly essentially get some of the different characters. You can actually see when looking through here that some of the different areas that are required to be like 5, for example, some of my units that I really want to increase the bond are in there. so you can see what kind of areas you need to work for to get the character that you want, essentially to build the bonds as you go through those lessons. Now talking about the cafe, this is going to be another way to increase the bond. This is a little bit random. Again, it's going to kind of depend on what time of the day it is, on who is going to be in here. So essentially you have a chance to have a little bit of a icon up here, a little bit of an animation. Eventually you click the character and it'll give you a bond level. Now it doesn't always increase to full rank. Essentially it'll do the same thing as the lessons, where it might give you a little bit of a headway towards the next rank, but it's not always a guaranteed rank. And then you can actually do an invitation. This is going to happen every 20 hours essentially, and you can actually invite one of the characters that you want, and you're able to kind of interact with them the same way that I was just talking about and give them a little bit of a boost towards that bond. Now the other way to do that while you're in here, you can actually give gifts to characters. You can actually pull this out and you can see who likes it. Now this is a gift that you actually get from the game at the very beginning, and this is a gift that everybody really likes. So for example, if I wanted to give it to her just because I was like, hey, you know what, you can have it, you can see that my bond increased and I got to level 4, which is going to give me an attack increase +5 or +9 rather, and that's going to help out quite a bit. So it is a little bit random, but you can invite one character essentially that you need every 20 hours. Go ahead and talk about Momo Talk. This is going to be a great way for you to check on your students essentially as you're kind of going through it. You can actually interact with them. This will give you a little bit more story, and like I said earlier, eventually you'll be prompted into some of the different stories as you can go through it. Like this one, for example, you can actually see her story and you do get rewards from it. As you can see, episode 1, you can get 28 premium currency, and then as you kind of progress through that, that is eventually when you'll have a little icon here indicating that you can get one of these full art screens. This is going to be the best way to indicate that, hey, you are getting to a point where you can actually get one of these full arts. Like I said, it does depend on the character, depending on the level. It doesn't necessarily say at what level you're actually going to get that, but you can click on this and see where you're at with the level of any characters that you want, and you can actually see some of the different rank bonuses as well. And then you can actually check at like what rank would it correspond to the stat bonuses, and then you can get it kind of an idea of what you can look at if you're willing to build that bond with that character. So it is a good way to build bond and also just check up on the bond in general and just kind of interact with the girls and get some different things with the premium currency and the full art if you're kind of looking into that for the home screen. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is going to be weaknesses and strengths when it comes to building your team. So if you jump into the campaign and you just go into one of these missions, you can actually see, so for example, let's just go into 3-3, go into enemies. You can actually see that, okay, for example, these guys are going to be doing normal damage, but they are weak to light essentially, and then they're weak to heavy. So we have a good balance of heavy and light. So whenever I go into synergy, I can actually see what kind of teams I need to build. So for example, each color kind of goes with each other. So light is going to be weak to explosive, you can see here, but it has a resist to piercing, and then it also has a resist to siege and structure, and then so forth. Like heavy is going to be weak to piercing, but it's going to have a resistance to blue. So essentially each color kind of corresponds with one another, and you can kind of get an idea of what kind of teams you need to build based on some of the enemies that you actually see here. So for example, I kind of want somebody that's able to do quite a bit of light damage and a little bit of heavy damage as well. So normal is actually not going to be a buff or a debuff. It's just going to do like a neutral amount of damage. So you can see that they're actually doing neutral damage essentially to us. So some of these stages actually do have characters or mobs essentially that will have a certain element to them. As you can see, for example, she actually does red damage, meaning that if I use a red unit that has a defensive trait anyway of red, you're going to see that I'm a little bit weak. So if we take that and apply it to our students, essentially we can go in here and we can see what kind of typing we have and what our defensive typing is and what our attack typing is. So essentially, if I look at her, she can do a little bit more damage to yellow, meaning that she does more damage to heavy units. But if an enemy is actually doing heavy damage as well, she'll actually take that weakness as well. So if they are doing something like normal damage, she's going to have a little bit of a neutral thing. It's not going to affect her as much. Or if they're doing like light damage, for example, again, this is going to be something that helps out quite a bit because it's not going to do a weakness towards her. But if they are doing that yellow damage, she's going to take a little bit of a weakness to it. So as you kind of go through some of the different units, you can see a lot of them are the same color, essentially mono colors here. But some of them do a certain type of attack damage, but also have a defense to a different color. For example, for her, she actually does heavy damage, so she's going to do a little bit more damage to yellow units, but she's going to be able to have a defense of blue, meaning that if they do blue damage, she's going to take a little bit more damage. Okay, so if that makes a little bit of sense, I know it's a little bit confusing, but just refer to the graph essentially, because that is going to help out quite a bit when it comes to the resistances. The bottom line is essentially just to match the colors. That is going to give you the best idea whether you're doing a weakness to them or they're doing a weakness to you. It's just kind of one of those things that are a little bit more color coded. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is just one other way to increase your units. If you are doing the gacha quite a bit, you can actually do unlock mystic. So if you are getting a bunch of dupes, you can actually see that eventually it'll build into some of your characters, and you can go from 3-star to 4-star all the way up to 5-star. You can do that for any of the characters. So for example, if you have a 3-star here or a 2-star here, you can see it takes a little bit less. There is another way to get these essentially. If you are doing a lot of the gacha, you can actually go into the shop, and there's a little section here where you can convert a lot of these shards that you actually get as of part of dupes essentially, that you eventually build up as you kind of go through the gacha, and you can actually translate them to any of the other units that you want to use. Currently I have 75, so I'm actually pretty close to be able to get maybe like a 2-star to a 3-star, Kind of just depends on who you want to get and who you kind of want to go for. But that is basically all I wanted to talk about, just to give you guys an idea of essentially how to build your teams a little bit more effective. It's going to be more prominent to build multiple teams to kind of counteract some of the different weaknesses and stuff like that, to give you a little bit more strength as you kind of move your way through the different areas and stuff like that. But for overall, account leveling is going to help you out quite a bit because your unit levels are tied to the account levels. But anyway guys, I'm going to go ahead and call it there. Have a good rest of your night, guys. Peace.